And now let me welcome onto the show Oklahoma head coach. Sorry, let me do that over. Oklahoma
Please.
State. I almost messed that one up. 3, 2, 1. And now let me welcome onto the show Oklahoma State head coach Mike Boynton. Mike, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Rob, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm always good, man. I'm always good. I got my Biggie shirt on and everything. So let me start you off with this. So last season, right, you had Cade Cunningham, and I think you probably ended up kind of outperforming some expectations that people had, considering how young your team was. You end up with the 4 seed in the tournament, and you win a whole bunch of close games. One of the most fun teams to watch. You're set up for a tournament run, and of course, you run into the Fighting Wayne Tinkles, who catch lightning in a bottle and end up knocking you off. You know, it's what makes college basketball the best, also what kind of makes college basketball the worst. So how do you kind of evaluate what your season was last year?
You know, there's so many things to go into. The first is I was really proud of our guy. Last year was really difficult. I think we've kind of forgotten about how difficult getting through last year was because it's in our rearview mirror. And so, you know, a lot of what happened really needs to have a little bit more amplification. You know, the guys who won it, Baylor, right, in our league, I mean, they obviously had a really good team, but to get all the way through to the end was a challenge. And obviously we wound up with probably the 2 best teams playing for the national championship still. But last year was a difficult year. I was proud of the way we, navigated it. You know, we were one of a few teams who didn't lose any games on our schedule. We played all the games that were scheduled to us. So, and then obviously adding to the fact that we had this transcendent talent and there was a lot of questions, and to be honest, I know a lot of it was like me, like, can you do this with a guy who's supposed to be that good? Is it going to look the way it looked, when Markelle Fultz was at Washington, or Ben Simmons was at LSU, or Anthony Edwards was at Georgia, when these guys go to non-traditional blue bloods and the team doesn't have success. And I hope people recognize the job that those kids and our staff did, just kind of keeping it together and really competing at a really, really high level and what we consider the best basketball league in the country. We finished with the 3rd best record. We played for a Big 12 championship in the tournament and got to a 4 seed. And we ran into, like you said, a really good a team that was playing really, really well at the time we played them. And Wayne's a really good friend of mine. I'm happy for him that it turned out well for him. I hate it was at our expense, but I was proud of what we did. I'm also proud of what I think we did for our program as a whole, really setting ourselves up, I think, to have some sustainability moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's actually the perfect segue heading into this season, because last year you guys actually were a lot younger than I think people realize. Ice Likely is old and feels like he's been in college for about 27 years by now. But everyone else in your rotation was like a lot of Avery Anderson was young. You got a lot of young pieces, the Boone brothers, Matthew Alexander Moncrief. And it's nice when you kind of can have a quote unquote veteran presence in a freshman like Cade Cunningham to kind of help you out with that. He's gone. So who's going to be the guy that kind of steps up into that leadership role for you guys this season?
Well, that's probably the $1 million question around here, because we don't have Cade. We don't have a guy like Cade anymore, but we do have really good players still. And we have guys who've been through it and have tasted some success. Isaac Likely going through this for the last time now. He'll have a heightened sense of urgency. You almost always see that with seniors who've been with a program for their entire careers. Not that I expect his numbers to jump off the page, but I expect him to have a consistent presence and having an impact on us having success on the court. But I certainly expect Avery to be more consistently productive. Wish that my hope is that Matthew Alexander and Rondell Walker can make the type of jumps production-wise that I think they're capable of. And then we added some really good transfers, I think, and Musa Cisse, the rim protecting big man from Memphis, Bryce Thompson from Kansas, who's a big-time scorer, McDonald's All-American coming out of high school, Tyreek Smith, who I think may be the most under probably valued person in this transfer class we have, because we don't have any traditional freshmen. And then Woody Newton, who was at Syracuse last year. So some really solid pieces. I mean, none of them are probably guys you would think are going to be first-team All-Americans, but in terms of having an impact and helping you win Big 12 games, I think they're all very, very capable of doing that.
So let's talk a little bit about Avery Anderson, because he's a guy I felt like you talk about guys making their sophomore jump. It felt like he made that jump in the second half of his sophomore year. He went from being someone who, frankly, I didn't really know all that much about him to being a guy putting up 31 on West Virginia and kind of being that scoring pop that could step up when Cade wasn't there. And, to call it like it is, you guys played pretty well when you didn't have the number one pick in the draft on last year's team. I think you won at West Virginia, then you beat Iowa State, and I think you hung with Baylor for like 33 minutes without Cade. So what did you see out of Avery last season? Where did that jump come from? And what are you expecting out of him heading into his junior year?
Well, to go back, when he was recruited here, there was a lot of concern about whether he could play at this level, to be perfectly honest. It was us, and maybe Florida was kind of messing around a little bit. He's from Louisiana, so LSU knew about him. But it was really a lot of mid-majors. I mean, SMU, North Texas. I mean, those are the type of schools that we really beat out. But he believed in himself. We believed in his ability, but we knew it would take time. And we kind of are running a little bit of a throwback kind of program where we just try to bring guys in and develop them. We had Cade, but really it's been guys who've come in good enough, but need some work, need some, seasoning, if you will. And Avery really took a jump when he realized he still had a role within our program last year with Cade here and with Isaac likely coming back, our two primary ball handlers, that he would be able to find his way as a scorer. And he averaged 19 a game in the last 6 games of the season last year. It was a big reason that we finished the season so strong. So what I need from him now is to be more consistent, more efficient with the ball in terms of decision-making. His assist turnover is something that has to improve for us this year because he's going to be a playmaker more consistently for us. And his three-point percentage, it jumped last year, but it was pretty bad as a freshman. And so as a junior, we wanted to tick up to show that improvement. And if he does that, his work ethic and his presence in our locker room as a leader are things that are going to also carry a lot of weight with us.
So you mentioned Bryce Thompson and Musa Cisse, 2 former 5-star prospects that have transferred into your programs. They had expectations going into the schools that they were at previously. They didn't quite live up to them. A lot of that, I'm just going to go ahead and pin that on the weird season we had last year. No off season, no chance to kind of get integrated within the program. But they're coming into situations where they're going to have to compete for minutes, right? I mean, you got the Boone brothers are back. We mentioned Matthew Alexander Moncrief, who is big, athletic, can shoot it. Guys like Rondell Walker. There are players that are going to be in front of them. So you're fostering a little bit of competition when it comes to practice and when it comes to earning those minutes, right? And at least in my mind, that's a good thing for a program when you got guys got to earn their minutes in practice, right?
No question. And this really goes to our philosophy and how we are building the program. And when I say throwback, right, it's not, 4 one and dones. We don't do that. We also don't just try to bring in 1 or 2 guys and promise them that they're going to be given the keys to drive this deal. What we do is we believe that hard work has value, that at the end of the day, you appreciate what you get based off of how you've earned it more. And we've got a bunch of guys who've bought into that. And I think that our depth will ultimately bear itself out as we go through the season. I think obviously you'll deal with injuries and foul trouble and whatnot, and to be able to still be sustainable in those moments. And I think back to my third year as head coach. We start off 7-0. Isaac likely gets sick. He misses a month, and we couldn't win a game. It was one player. Happened to be really the only true ball handling playmaker we had at the time was the problem. So lesson learned for me, you gotta recruit some depth. You got to be able to develop guys. You got to have some guys that in a pinch can step in and do the job. So I applaud my staff and the kids for believing in it, because they understand minutes are going to be hard to come by, and they've embraced that work to earn those minutes. And we'll see how it continues to go over the next 3 or 4 weeks in practice.
Yeah, and you don't have to look any farther down than Waco to see how stuff like that can work. You get old, you stay old, you add guys that buy into a culture, and you find the right fits, whether or not they start out at Presbyterian or they start at a place like Auburn, like Davion Mitchell did. So who's been impressive? Like who's going to take this step forward? We mentioned Bryce Thompson, we mentioned Musa Cisse, we mentioned both of the Boones. You got Bryce Williams coming back to. Like who are the guys that we're going to be impressed with this season?
I'll go with 2 newcomers first, because they were both so highly touted and recruited, and neither one of them had a great experience. I still wasn't quite sure how they would respond to this type of environment where, right, they want this to work now, right? And so the conversations in recruiting still have to be honest and say, hey, there's opportunity here. And to be honest, they both came in and have exceeded my expectations in terms of their attitudes about the work and their willingness to go make themselves, kind of remake themselves and prove themselves over again that they certainly were capable and good enough to play at this level and have success. So Bryce and Musa have been a pleasure to have here so far. They both bring different things to the table. Musa is still much more effective as a defensive presence than he is as a guy you play through offensively. And then Bryce Thompson, kind of opposite, right? He's a guy who's much more effective as a scorer, a shot maker, playmaker, and he's coming along on the defensive side. But for returners, I'd be shocked if I don't see a big jump from Rondell Walker this year. I think Avery Anderson will have another good year, but Rondell Walker is the one, him and Matthew Alexander-Moncrief are the two that I kind of hope have that same type of freshman to sophomore production jump that Avery Anderson and Caleb Boone had from their freshman to sophomore years.
So I think the one concern that I really have with the way that your roster is constructed is shooting, right? Mm-hmm. If you take away Cade's 40% 3-point shooting last year, I think the rest of the team shot, I want to say it was 31.1% out of the number in front of me, but it wasn't ideal. So who's going to kind of step into that role? Is that something that you expect Avery to shoot a little better? Obviously, Bryce Thompson is a guy that can make shots. And look, in this day and age, floor spacing is the name of the game.
Absolutely. And there was no, we addressed that immediately when the season was over. We had some guys last year we thought would be more consistent making shots than they were. And we did two things. We recruited to it. Woody Newton has a reputation as a shot maker at 6'9", so a bigger shooting forward. Bryce Thompson, I've seen that enough to believe that he's going to be a shot maker for us. But then we need guys who've been in our program to continue to make jumps. Keelan Boone is a guy who's got the ability. He just hasn't been on the court consistently enough to have the reps and opportunity. And then Rondell Walker, those two in terms of returners are guys that I really need to have that work that we put in this summer really pay off for them. Because if we can find, like you said, I agree. If we can find some consistent shot producing from two guys, that can change the dynamics of what our ceiling is as a team this year.
So I think that this is the year where you can really put your stamp on Oklahoma State as your program, right? Like it took a little while for you to get it going, but you got Cade Cunningham coming in and you built a really good team last year. But building a team is different than building that kind of sustainable program where you don't have to worry about those one and done. So what is your level of expectation for this year? And what do you think would be a quote unquote successful season for Oklahoma State basketball in 2021-22?
Yeah, and so without putting a number on it, or we need to get to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, right? Because I don't know, right? There's so many things that go into the actual end, right? So, but what I do think is this team, because we don't have any true freshmen, right? I have no guys who haven't been a part of college basketball. So we're coaching like this is a veteran team, and we're approaching this season like these guys should know what it takes to have an opportunity to win. Come game day. And so I think it's very fair to expect this team to be one of the most competitive teams in our conference and to be in the conversation halfway through league play as a real contender. And then from there, if you're competitive in this league, you're a tournament team. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it gets down to who you match up with, who's high, and stuff like that. But I think this team certainly, and obviously Cade's my guy. I love him. He helped put us in this position where there is some national interest from other really good players, and we've been able to build a really competitive schedule. But I think we have a chance to be a little bit better of a team, not because we have better players. We have more depth, and we're older. We're now a year more experience of guys going through it. So I don't think it's beyond anybody's expectations to think this team should be a tournament team and should have an opportunity to advance and become a consistent tournament participant moving forward.
Yeah, I think if you look at the top three teams in the Big 12 with Kansas, Texas, and Baylor, they're really, really good. But there's no reason teams like you and Texas Tech and West Virginia, like there's some teams that should be able to hang. The Big 12 is never going to be easy. And I think we can say as much this season. So, Mike, listen, I appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much, and best of luck this season.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Appreciate you, man.
Before we move on, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up for Bet Rivers yet, now is the time because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, it's more secure, and it's more reliable. Now that basketball season is tipping off, get in on the action at betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And while I got you here, let's talk about the Field of 68 Media Network, where college basketball matters most all year round. This is a digital media and podcast network that we've been building over the course of the last year. We have shows hosted by some of your favorite players covering the program that they love the most. AJ Guyton hosts the House of Hoosier. Eric Devendorf covers Syracuse on the scorer's table. Dan Dickow hosts the Gonzaga Bulldog broadcast. We have Florida's Patrick Young and Duke's Andre Dawkins and North Carolina's Shammond Williams and Michigan's Stu Douglas and Illinois' Deion Thomas. The list goes on and on and on. We have more than 30 shows right now. So hit the links below and check them all out. And while you're at it, make sure that you go check out the Field of 12 Media Network, your home for college football. That was Oklahoma State head coach Mike Boynton, and I am now joined by Oklahoma State beat writer for the Oklahoma, Jacob Unruh. Jacob, what's going on, man? Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So last season did not necessarily end the way that season was supposed to end, right? We were supposed to build up to this great run with Cade Cunningham through the NCAA tournament, and they kind of flamed out in the second round, giving up 80 points to an Oregon State team that nobody thought should be in the tournament in the first place. So what is the feeling like in Stillwater after the way that season ended heading into a new season?
You know, I think they left that season feel like they missed an opportunity. The way the tournament was opening up for them, they thought they had a chance to maybe make a run to the Final Four, at least Elite Eight, and really do some damage with Cade in the 1 year they have him. But there's a lot of optimism this year. They like the progression of the guys that were around Cade last year. Everyone's back but Cade. They like that progression. They like the new guys they brought in, Musa Cisse. They like Woody Newton, obviously Bryce Thompson from Kansas, and Tyreek Smith. They bring those guys in. You're not bringing any freshmen. You're bringing guys with college experience, and that's huge for a team that I think actually overall got a little deeper and maybe better than even though when they had Cade.
Yeah, there were a couple of guys that broke out, I guess maybe midway through the season, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I do think it is also important to note they're bringing back a lot of non-Cade Cunningham players from last season, and those teams without Cade Cunningham last year, they won at West Virginia, they blew out Iowa State, they hung with Baylor for about 30 minutes before kind of fizzling out down the stretch. They weren't bad without him.
No, absolutely not. That's the thing. Cade made these guys better. But Avery Anderson is the guy that when you talk about breakout players, really, I think arguably, and Mike Boynton has said this, is one of the most improved players in the country, if not the most improved player in the country. He was not very good his freshman year. Didn't shoot very well at all. Defensively, he was okay, but just really struggled. And last year, it just clicked. And defensively, he was really good. He started scoring in the 20s a lot of times with Cade. Even when Cade was healthy at the end of the season, Avery was that second guy. He put on a real big show at West Virginia in that win. And, that was the emergence of him. Caleb Boone emerged in the second half of the season after a really slow start. You got guys that had breakouts like that, and they got this confidence from going against the Cade Cunningham every day in practice and how he made them better. And it really showed in times, even without him, that, hey, this team can really do it. And you add some of those guys this year, and I think they really feel good about themselves.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, there were a lot of young pieces on that roster. Like Avery was a sophomore, right? Matthew Alexander Moncrief was a freshman. Caleb Boone and Keelan Boone were sophomores. So getting that 1 year of experience that I think they really needed kind of raised the floor for what you can expect from them this season. Let's talk a little bit about Avery because I thought that it wasn't just the improvement from freshman to sophomore year. It was the improvement from the start of his sophomore year to where he was as we headed into March. So what kind of changed about him? And did you guys see anything that kind of signaled that improvement coming heading into the year?
Well, he got off to kind of a weird start because I think he played in the opener and then he had to sit out a couple of games because of COVID protocols. Because his roommate Chris Harris Jr. had COVID, and it just turned this whole thing. And but then he made his first start against Texas in December, and then didn't leave the starting lineup from there. The biggest change to me was you just see his confidence grow. You could just see him start to realize what he's capable of a little bit more. I understand that he doesn't have to be the guy anymore. In high school, he was a guy who would drop 30 to 40 points regularly, at that level, and could put on a show, and it has mixtapes and does all this stuff. And he discovered that he could still do some of that stuff, but do it in different ways. And he looked more controlled. He looked more confident. And the defense really kind of led to better things for him. He figured that out a lot better, and was able to make a bunch of steals and big plays, and really kind of just grew mentally, I think, more than just athletically.
So the other guy that he's going to be paired with on the wing is probably going to end up being Bryce Thompson, who was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school, but it never really clicked for him at Kansas, right? It was tough for him to kind of break into the rotation. He seemed like one of those freshmen that really was hurt by the fact that he didn't have a normal offseason and a normal preseason and a normal way to kind of get integrated with a college basketball program. He's had that this year for Oklahoma State. What are people expecting out of him? What have you heard coming out of some of these summer workouts? And is he a guy that has a chance to really break out as a sophomore?
Yeah, I think he does. I think there's a little bit of regret there for not originally going to OSU. And when you think of that, like, think of the idea that if Bryce would have come with, Cade Cunningham, like, oh my goodness, But I think, the injuries played some factors last year too. But I just think you're right. He didn't integrate very well. I think it's really interesting to see how he's going to operate in a Mike Boynton system. The way Mike lets players play with a little more freedom. Especially offensively, when you look at what he did with Cade and let Cade have so much freedom, he's going to let Bryce have a lot of freedom. Just watching a little bit of the workout the other day, they're playing fast. He's out there hitting threes. He looks comfortable. He's going to be a really good defender. He was a good defender last year. I think that they're expecting him a lot out of him. They're kind of still a little leery to say how much they expect because they're not quite sure the quick adjustment, the quick changes. They want to make sure that he's going to adjust well before they're saying he's going to be really good to go. But I think they're really, really expecting a lot from him, more than what you saw last year at Kansas.
Yeah. So Ice Likely, he's the guy that played for Team USA on the U19 team a couple of years ago. Another really highly regarded recruit. He never feels like his impact is not necessarily shown in the numbers, right? What kind of leadership are you getting out of the one guy that's kind of like the senior, the senior holdover, senior leader, whatever buzzword and cliche term you want to use to kind of frame that? That's kind of what he is, right?
Yeah, I kind of look at like Ice Likely is the most fascinating player on the team, to be honest. It's hard to quantify what he does. I mean, for this team, but he's the guy that makes them go. If Likely isn't right, OSU's not going to be right. I think he's going to facilitate a little bit more this year. He didn't have the ball in his hands as much last year. Admitted to us last week that, hey, I struggled with that a little bit mentally. I think it kind of put him in a weird spot. He had some injuries, but he's a guy that gets to the basket really well. He's not going to shoot lights out. He's not a very good shooter. That's the worst part of his game, probably, is his shooting ability. But he can still score around the basket. He's the best rebounder on the team, even for the big guys. Moussa Cisse might challenge that this year, obviously. But I think he's the best rebounding guard, can play in the low post. Very, very good defender, very, very rugged defender. And he just leads this team. He's their guy that when things are right, everything's going to be good for OSU. But when he struggled, I mean, you saw 2 years ago when he got sick and missed a few weeks in the season. They started out 7-0, missed a few weeks in non-conference, came back for the conference, still was not himself, and they really struggled. So I think having him right is going to be really big key for OSU this season.
Well, let's talk about that front court a little bit. We got Caleb Boone coming back. We got Matthew Alexander Moncrief coming back. You mentioned Moussa Cisse, who was a top 10 prospect when he enrolled at Memphis. He never really had the impact that I think a lot of people expected him to have. It just seemed like it was a little bit of a weird process getting him used to having to play a little bit more on the perimeter. When it comes to big guys, it's always, in high school, they're told, stand in front of the rim and be really tall. And then you get to college, It's like, okay, now you have to go out and cover ball screens. It's like, well, that's a little bit of a change. So we also have Keelan Boone, a couple of other transfers coming in. You mentioned Tyreek Smith. You mentioned Woody Newton from Syracuse. So how do you think this is all going to shake out? It feels like there are a lot of bodies up front, for a team that seems to kind of like playing with four guards. So how are these minutes going to shake out? How are these egos going to end up being shaken out? And what are you hearing about some of these new pieces?
I think that the four guard mentality OSU's had has been a lot of necessity with four guards. They haven't had this depth in the low post. And so I think Caleb Boone has submitted himself into this lineup. I think Moncrief is an interesting player. He proved last year he could play more inside than people thought. I think the idea is they would like him to be a little bit more outside, kind of a wing type guy a lot more times. Like he's a little more comfortable there. And I think they're really expecting big things out of progression for him. But Cisse really adds this dynamic that they haven't had. They haven't had a true big man like him. Caleb Boone is 6'9", 6'10", however you want to say it, but he's not the big physical center that a lot of guys will throw out at Kansas, will throw at you. TCU's thrown at him with Kevin Samuel in the past. He's not there anymore. But, you throw guys like that. That's always been a problem for a Caleb Boone. But you get a Musa Cisse in there now who can handle that. I think Boynton's got some options there. I think I've thought about the starting five. We haven't talked to Boynton about it yet, but I think, you've got Avery, Bryce, likely. Then I think you can go Caleb Boone and you got a mix of Moncrief or Cisse depending on some matchups or how one's playing. And you get that. Woody Newton's a good stretch four. Tyreek Smith's a big body down there that blocks a lot of shots. It's depth. I think Boynton's really good at managing these egos and time, and he's going to get them all in there at the right moments because they've had progression in their low post, but now they finally got the depth and talent that they've wanted.
How much of an emphasis has perimeter shooting been for this team? I think last year, if you took away Cade's 40% shooting from three, they shot something like 31.6% from three as a team, which is not very good at all, which is part of the reason why I think some of Cade's assist numbers were low. I mean, you get someone for a wide open three and they miss it, that doesn't go down in the book as an assist. So when you have a big, powerful front court and a lot of talent up there, you want to be able to space the floor. Otherwise, those guys aren't going to have any room in the paint to operate. So how much of an emphasis has that been? Who can step up and kind of, I don't know if leading the role, spacing the floor is something that is the best way to phrase it, but I feel like that's something that should be a focus, right?
Yeah, I think when you watch the Lillard practice watch the other day, there's a lot of fast pace in the scrimmage, a lot of outside shooting. I think they're looking at that. And I think that's why they brought in like a Woody Newton. He can space that floor and really kind of help with the second unit and help that area. Bryce Williams is back, obviously. He can shoot a little bit out there. He spaces the floor really well with his athleticism. I think it's going to come down to kind of what Avery does. Avery took a big jump as a shooter last year. I think if he takes another leap forward, which is something NBA scouts talked to him about when he tested the process a little bit, I think that's really going to help. And Bryce Thompson, I think, is going to be a big help there. Bryce has always been a good shooter, and you get him involved in this offense and get him rolling. I think they're going to improve that. I don't know if they're going to get quite to 40 like Cade was. And people thought Cade wasn't a very good shooter coming in at times either, and he came in and proved them wrong. So I think there's some answers there, but I think it's a big emphasis because that's really sunk OSU at times the last two seasons, especially their inability to shoot from outside.
Yeah, I mean, if you have Avery Anderson and Bryce Thompson knocking down shots and a couple different guys, it could be a stretch four. All of a sudden, those ball screens you put Ice Likely in, there's a lot more space in the lane to be able to make that stuff work. All right, two questions. I'm going to start you off with this one first. Who's one of these guys on the bench? Someone is going to step forward and kind of be that guy that no one sees coming. Is it Rondell Walker, Bryce Williams, one of the transfers that we mentioned? Donovan was like, who's the guy that's going to kind of play a bigger role maybe than a lot of us expect?
I think it's going to be Rondell Walker. We haven't even mentioned him at all, which is kind of crazy when you think about the freshman season he had. He's another one of those 3-point shooters, but it's his defense that really energizes that team. He comes off the bench, will make big plays defensively, hit some corner threes. He's so much energy and athleticism. I think it's Rondell who's kind of line and take that next step. I honestly think Rondell and then Moncrief, I think will be a starter a lot of times. I think those two are in line for huge leaps this season. They're going to really help the team.
Yeah, I mean, if those two take a step forward and Bryce Thompson can come in and be a guy that looks like a 5-star recruit as a sophomore, I don't know if it's necessarily the perfect comparison saying like what Quentin Grimes was his when he went to Houston versus what Bryce Thompson can be at Oklahoma State. But that, to me, that kind of, if he has that kind of an impact, it's something that would make Oklahoma State a lot better. Last one I got for you. All right, so this is, I think, what is year 4 for Mike Boynton at Oklahoma State, right? So he's coming off a year where he had Cade Cunningham in there. Maybe wasn't necessarily the greatest season or the perfect ending, but they were really good. I mean, they were in that top 15, top 20 range for most of the year. They were a top 4 seed. They were back into the national conversation. And now you're losing Cade Cunningham, and you still have a team that's going to be in the mix for a top 25 spot at some point this season, which I think says a lot about where the program is right now. So what constitutes a successful season for Oklahoma State basketball this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, last year surprised in a lot of ways because even with Cade, I don't know if people exactly saw them running through the Big 12 tournament like they did and get into the title game. You expected an NCAA tournament win. I think they expected more. So there was a little bit of exceeding expectations in areas and a little bit of disappointments. I think if you make another run of the Big 12 tournament, I don't know the title game is going to be, if they don't get there, I don't know if that's going to be too disappointing because the Big 12
the Big 12 is really good at the top. Breaking news. It's very good at the top of the Big 12.
Exactly. And I think OSU's in that 3 or 4 range right now on the top with this conference. But but I think if they get the tournament again and if they can get, I think the idea is they get that second weekend. I think you've got to progress like that if you're OSU. If you get that second weekend of the NCAA tournament, I think that's a huge success for OSU. Anything else is really a bonus, but I think that second weekend should be the goal as you take steps forward under Mike Boynton.
Well, listen, Jacob, I appreciate the time. I don't think I could possibly be more fired up for this college basketball season. We're going to have fans back. It's going to be something approaching normalcy, hopefully, as long as we don't get too many shutdowns. So I appreciate your time. All the best.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.